Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Default Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from around the world to share their experiences. And our guest today is Jakob Knutzen, a co-founder and CEO at Butter. Jakob, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jakob, your diverse experience as entrepreneur, co-founding multiple startups before, and now leading Butter as CEO. With that, could you please give us kind of brief introduction to your background and how your journey led to where you are today?
Yeah, sure, Vid. So what can I say? In terms of my background, started out my career in strategy consulting. Was with what's now Bain and Company in Denmark for close to 4 years. Before I got the opportunity to start a digital marketing agency up in Indonesia, of all places. So
Okay.
went to Jakarta there, built that up. We sold it off in that was late 2016, early 2017. Stuck around for another year or so in Asia, and then left for Denmark, where I'm originally from,
Okay.
to build something a bit more scalable. Started a company within game streaming, content discovery on top of Twitch, Mixer, which existed at that time, YouTube gaming, those things, with the people that would be my now co-founders in Butter. We built a product, didn't work out, didn't identify the problem correctly, but got a great team together, especially a great co-founding team together. So when we had to shut down our old company in early 2020, we stuck together as a co-founding team with Adam, our CTO now, Chris, our CPO with design background, and myself as a CEO, and we say initially driving the growth of marketing for Butter. We had this trio of the hacker, the hipster, and the hustler. And we were particularly excited about the whole remote workspace. We built our previous company as a remote company. So knew that there was a lot there. That was before it was cool. Like you guys also did remote before it was cool. So we're very excited about the problems in that space. So COVID hit right after, and we started doing workshops for small teams and companies that had been pushed remotely by COVID. Suddenly, a lot of people didn't know how to build and operate remote companies and remote teams, especially people that had never done so before. So we started kind of sharing our best practices in terms of workshops with the idea of identifying, hey, where are the biggest problems that people face? That was when we got the insight that led us to Butter, namely that driving remote workshops and trainings like we were doing was tremendously difficult. Big overload on the tech side. We were trying to make them engaging, so we used like Miro, Mentimeter, breakout calls, you name it, tons of different tools. Very difficult to manage when you're doing that in Zoom, and it was very hard to make things engaging and interactive. People were leaning back; they weren't engaging at all. So we built Butter as a video conferencing tool, laser focused on workshops and trainings, and to this day, that's what we're doing with Butter.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. And even your LinkedIn bio highlights this diverse and distributed nature of your company, right? So, and I'm just curious, how has this commitment to international hiring, kind of impacted the overall company culture? Are there any specific benefits or maybe challenges you have experienced as a result of building this diverse and kind of distributed team?
Yeah, I mean, benefits so many. Again, the overall benefit is I guess you would also nod to, is just access to talent is so much easier when it's not 10 kilometers around your office that's your hiring brand, right? So we've got amazing people from, I think we're in 8 different countries at the moment.
8 countries, okay.
Yeah, so 17 people across 8 countries. Amazing people. From Indonesia, Malaysia, Nigeria, Dubai, Portugal, Netherlands, all over the place. So that's the number one thing. I think another benefit that we've seen more in the product development is that having people from more diverse backgrounds just leads you to build a more a more thought through product, a less biased product, if you will. because it's a product that works for people from different cultures, but also from different. I mean, we're building video conferencing, so from different networking, say, setups, right? Or from people working in Indonesia, networks are very different there from, say, Denmark.
Right.
Devices are different. Everything's different. So it helps us build a product that is more inclusive, if you will. The difficulties are, like, again, as you mentioned, different backgrounds means different types of people. It means different cultures, and it does, like, even if we focus on hiring people with a specific set of skills and an overarching kind of culture or cultural mindset, there is still a lot of, say, biases or differences in terms of the national cultures that we are hiring from that are maybe not as explicit and that you don't think about until you kind of start working together. So it takes some time getting fully into that groove.
Yeah, and having kind of teams in 7 different countries, right? So how do you address this potential communication and collaboration challenges? Yeah, that may arise due to time zone differences, like you said, cultural stuff, maybe some language barriers.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
Second, one by one. So language barriers, we screen that in recruiting. We only recruit people that have strong English capabilities. It's kind of prerequisite.
Yep.
But cultural barriers, I think that's in the recruiting. We focus very much on having a common set of at least, like, company values. We call it operating principles. We defined 8 different operating principles. For instance, one is embrace silliness, which is very core to our product and who we are. And we screen for these various types of cultural mentality very, very heavily. And so that goes. So I'd say that people across Butter have more in common than Danish people have, for instance, right? So people across a national culture. So that's very important for us to kind of screen for that. So that's kind of how we try to. You cannot perfectly overcome cultural challenges, but you can make sure that at least where things are important, you make sure that people have a lot in common.
Okay.
Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead.
Now, in talking about about recruitment and hiring, right? So you touched this a bit. In one of your previous interviews, I guess you've mentioned these challenges of recruiting talent from around the world. What maybe main obstacles have you faced when hiring internationally, right? So, and how has Butter overcome those issues?
I think so. Again, if you kind of go through the funnel, the first thing is knowing even where to start, right? The sourcing problem.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know where to begin when it's. If thinking differently, if you're only recruiting from one national area, then you're used to, hey, like, you've got this national platform, or you've got maybe a Copenhagen-based platform, an Amsterdam-based platform, and you put your job ads up there, and then kind of thing, people come to you, right? So when you already kind of have that constraint, then it's easier to kind of figure out where to source people from. When the world is your oyster, then that constraint is removed. And it's much, much harder to even know where to begin on sourcing. For sourcing, we've overcome those challenges by constraining ourselves specifically, right? So we constrained ourselves to a number of geographies that we wanted to recruit from, set forth a number of criteria there. For instance, some geographies that we've been particular on have been Indonesia. I used to work out there. My co-founder lives in Bali. Malaysia, Nigeria, India, and then certain parts of Europe. So we've simply settled, like, there's enough talent in those geographies to begin kind of sourcing from there. Other sourcing things.
I'm sorry, and can you go a bit deeper in terms of criteria? I mean, I'm just wondering. Like you said, you had some personal experience with some specific countries, but what maybe some other criteria?
Other criteria: language skills, overall good English language skills in general in those geographies. Number of unicorns, so a lot of tech talent in some of those. For instance, Indonesia is one of the largest number of unicorns, if not the largest, in Southeast Asia, I believe.
Okay, that's a good one.
So that was another thing. yeah, so those like so market familiarity, language, overall tech density, costs. Like
Mm-hmm.
again, cost is a big thing in building a startup, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So those were some of the things that we mainly look for.
The time differences.
Oh yeah, important point as well. Time difference. Like we at the moment we've got like two time zone chunks, if you will, and that's Asia and Europe. We
Mm-hmm.
tried working with with Americas as well,
Mm-hmm.
with one person there, but it wasn't super successful in terms of
Mm-hmm.
time difference. Get much harder. Two time zones you can operate with. Three that becomes super hard because you have two that never have an overlap at any given time.
Okay. 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 Cool. Thank you. And let's go back to obstacles that you faced, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the first one, like you have to choose, right,
Sourcing
the right
super
countries.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think, by the way, one more tip on the sourcing part has been to identify a number of companies where you know that there's a lot of talent, like hence also the unicorn requirement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we identified a number of companies that have high level of talent,
Mm-hmm.
understood, okay, what are the different titles from
Mm-hmm.
people in that company we want to target, and then, hit them on LinkedIn, right? Because
Okay.
you knew which companies, like you knew which geographies you honed in, right? Geography, company, title in that
Right.
company. And then we
Mm-hmm.
began sourcing that. That was super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but other obstacles in terms of I think those were the main ones in terms of sourcing. Is this whole like everything just being the option.
Mm-hmm.
When you move down the funnel, then you go to screening. Screening gets and screening is hard in two areas, right? One thing is skill wise screening. The other is cultural screening, I'd say, or
All
personal
right.
screening. Skill, like we tried to standardize it, like especially, but it depends a bit on the product areas. We found that some geographies were stronger in certain skill levels than others. Like product design, we found we most of our all of our product design at the moment is Europe based
Mm-hmm.
and Northern Europe based, because that's where we found the people, at least from our sourcing, that were strongest there.
Yep.
Most of our engineering is Asia or Africa based,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where we found a lot of skills there. But the skill, like, and we have standardized. We ended up having pretty standardized tests for people there, almost always
Mm-hmm.
like real time case based. Personality is hard, man. Like screen for personality, get across, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so that was a like that was where we ended up, both on the cultural side, being very particular on our operating principles, and
Mm-hmm.
having almost asking very specific questions based on those operating principles, trying to
Mm-hmm.
be as specific in terms of like trying to be as specific and not general as possible, meaning asking, hey, could you please give me an example of when this happened or when that happened, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's how we got very deep into that. But I still find that difficult to this day to kind of make sure that we screen properly on a personal level.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. And you mentioned that you tried to, as far as I understood, hunt some guys from unicorns, local unicorns, right?
Mhm,
So,
mhm, mhm.
and again, also in one of your interviews, you mentioned that this, the competing with well-funded startups, unicorns, big tech companies for top talent can be tough, right? So,
Mhm.
I'm just curious, what sets Butter apart as an employer of choice, for potential hires from different parts of the world?
Yeah, I again, when we compete against established players, I think the first thing is the same thing for all startups like ourselves, and that is that you need to find the people that are excited about the challenge and the
Mm-hmm.
autonomy that you get in the startup, not the monetary, like not the money, right?
Right.
Because you cannot compete head to head on the money with some of the bigger players in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to find the people that are excited about the challenge. There's also a self-selection process almost in that, right? Because you find the people that are excited about challenge, those will also often be the best people, as opposed to the ones who are driven very much by the money.
Right.
So I think that was the main thing that kind of that's the main thing that sets a startup aside
Mm-hmm.
from the established players.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing on that is also equity. Like we offer equity to all of our employees, so
Okay.
that's something that gets people excited.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
I think for butter, like again, then it's our unique. Like, do people like our way of being, like our unique culture? That goes back to the operating principles and kind of who we want to be, and also a lot of the content that we put out there, whether people can see them working with a team like ours.
Okay. And you touched this equity stuff, right? So, and I'm just curious, when it comes to hiring your teammates, do you hire them as a contractors or as a full-time employees, maybe through Deal, Oyster, Velocity Global, whatever, those employer of record providers? How do you do this?
Yeah, we do a mix. We have some people that are on. It depends a bit on the geography and the setup, but we have some people that are employer of record and some people that are contractors. But we do everything through remote.com and Deal. Those are the two platforms that we use.
And we work with a bunch of startups, a bunch of companies, and I've noticed that some of my clients they hire talent as long-term contractors, but treat them as a core team members. Like you said, they provide equity and all this stuff. But I know it's kind of challenging in some specific countries to do this in terms of employment laws, in terms of this kind of stuff. So it can lead to some challenges in terms of giving the equal bonuses, PTO policies, to guys from different parts of the world, because again, it's because of compliance stuff and stuff like this. So how do you overcome these challenges in your company? Did you face any legal issues, employment compliance, misclassification issues in working with 7, like you said, countries, right?
No, we've been pretty. We've done our research well when it comes to which countries we can do what in. And we're very open to, like, what we care about as a company is the full cost of the employee. Right. We don't care about what classification. Well, in some instances, that's like, be careful of hiring in some European countries that have very strict labor laws. We had some bad experiences there. I'm not going to say which country, but we had
Spain. Spain, no. Okay.
No, I don't want to call anyone specifically out, but
okay.
Just there's some countries where hiring, even as an employer of record, have had like really nasty impacts on us. Nothing big, right? But have a high level of awareness of where you go. But aside from that, we care about the full cost to us as an employer. We don't care about what kind of taxes go on top or whatever. And the more we can give to our employees, the happier we are. And when I say employees, like, I don't care too much about what the specific contractual thing is. We treat everyone as though they're part of the team, right? So, but it's a full cost. We actually give our employees even choices on whether they want to be classified as one thing or the other thing, as far as the labor law goes, of course, as long as we're compliant with that. Then we do give a lot of choices on classification. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And also, I would like to talk about another kind of method of approach on how you can work with foreign talent, right? So, and I'm talking about outsourcing. I know that you used, at least from what I know, you used to work with some outsourcing agencies before, right? And just to give you kind of my perspective on this, I also worked in the outsourcing company for maybe 45 years or something. I know this from inside out, and from my opinion, the outsourcing industry is kind of poised for a huge transformation, right? With compliance solutions like Deal, Oyster, collaboration tools like Slack, Zoom, Butter, right? And finance payroll solutions like I don't know, Wise, Pioneer, those cross-border payment systems. It seems that there is less need to rely on some outsourcing companies to be a kind of middleman, between you and those guys. So considering your past statements about outsourcing, your past experience about this, do you think that there are some situations where outsourcing could be a viable option for long-term collaboration, right? I understand that for short term it makes sense. I mean, you just delegate some part of your work just, for a month or two. But in terms of long-term collaboration, like, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I have strong opinions on outsourcing in the early days. Like, I really think one needs to be very careful about outsourcing the core business, and for a startup, it's building product.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have the capabilities in house to build your core product and manage
Mm-hmm.
that. I think then, as you mentioned, outsourcing can be helpful for projects. Always super helpful, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
temporary skilled labor that you get in long-term collaboration. It can also work. I think you need to be a little bit later stage, and I think you
Mm-hmm.
need to be. It cannot be in a core area of your product that you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it's in a non-core area, and you have the capabilities to manage outsourcing well in-house, then that can be helpful. And I think that that's both from marketing perspectives. Like, some
Mm-hmm.
areas that I'd be very comfortable outsourcing would be certain types of content, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
certain type of
Mm-hmm.
content
Mm-hmm.
production, where you might not need a full-time employee on a particular very specialized area, but you still need it on an ongoing basis. Outsourcing makes a ton of sense. Same thing goes for, we can say, niche areas of your product or specialized areas of your product where you might not need a full-time employee on a specific thing, or a full-time team on a specific feature.
Mm-hmm.
But you might be able to outsource that to someone else that is specialized in that area.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
probably what I do it. Yeah.
So you're saying that it still makes sense in some specific situations, right?
Mhm.
So it will be there, in for maybe in 5 years or so, but there will be some transformation, right? That's what you're
Yes,
saying.
I think so. But I mean, I do agree that for all the hiring reasons that I just mentioned before, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's not a piece of cake starting a remote team, and a lot of people,
Right.
they come with. I've heard so many. What's the word? So many biases against running remote teams. So many cultural biases as well. Like, oh my god, I hired someone from India, and like, oh, I cannot work with Indians. Like, stupid stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That comes just from bad management or inexperience in
Yeah.
running remote teams.
100%.
And it actually gets me very frustrated whenever I hear these things. And going back to that, like, kickstarting something through outsourcing might be the way to go for people that are not super experienced in running cross-cultural teams or running remote teams. So there's definitely something there as well, but I haven't fully kind of wrapped my head around it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so also you touched this a bit. You've shared some insights on managing international distributed team, right? So what I would like to talk about is more kind of leadership, right? Leadership. When we have, like, maybe you can how have these key differences between managing a global team, right, and managing a team in a single geographic region shape maybe your leadership style and approach to team management?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a super good question and something I think about a lot. For context, again, when I was in Indonesia, I managed a team of 50 people there in
Mm-hmm.
Indonesia
Mm-hmm.
locally, right? So it's probably my most like co-located geographic leadership experience.
Okay.
Um, the big kind of underlying thing is everything needs to be much more conscious and much
Mm-hmm.
more explicit.
Okay.
When I say everything, I mean documentation. Things need to be
Right.
documented. Super conscious about that. Even if you're just a team of 10 people,
Right.
it needs to be super well documented. Communication, super well described on what kinds of communications goes where. Like, does it go on Slack? Does it go on email? Does it go on sync? Like, when do we use synchronous? When do we use asynchronous? Again, even if you're just a team of 10 people, it needs to be written down
Mm-hmm.
and be explicit how you do things. So,
Okay.
culture, right? Sometimes when you're co-located, the culture can kind of form itself. When you're a remote team, you need to have operating principles or values or something that you often communicate around and make explicit. So again, I think that's a very big difference between managing a co-located team and a remote team, is that you need to be extremely conscious and explicit about everything.
Okay. Yeah, totally makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Oh, and it's by the way, it's not necessarily like it sounds like, oh, that sounds like it's a lot of work. Sure, it's more work in the beginning, but once you get it rolling, it's so much more scalable than if you haven't written all these things, if you haven't defined all these things when you're like 10, 20 people, suddenly you're 50 people, suddenly you're 100 people, and it's just all over the place, right? If you're co-located, because you kind of just manage to go through it without being forced to be explicit. Yeah.
So what you're saying that when you have this process in place, right? So it will be not so hard to do, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
But you have to kind of invest early on in putting those processes in place. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so and probably my last question. So for those who are kind of new to this global hiring staff, remote work, could you share maybe 3 key pieces of advice for those entrepreneurs and executives who are early to this? What should they consider or prioritize in order to build a successful distributed workforce from day one?
First thing is decide on co-located or remote. Don't decide on hybrid.
Really?
Yes, never hybrid or really.
Why?
It's so dangerous.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. If you do hybrid, everything gets muddier. Everything gets less. So going back to this whole being explicit on things, it's way harder to be explicit on documenting things when you're doing hybrid because oh yeah, we were just talking there, and like now we came to a decision. Do I go back to my screen, my computer, and then go into Notion and document what I just talked with this guy about?
Okay.
We have a synchronous meeting with 3 people. 2 of them are co-located. 1 is hybrid. But it's a bit problematic to kind of get the other person in. Let's just fix it out, us 2, right? And then you end up not having a specific person that could be a key decision maker or like having a key impactful insight that you needed for this particular decision. Everything, and if you're co-located, it's easier because you just go get that guy, right? Or girl. If you're remote, well, everything is easier because you just, huddle with these people and get everyone together anyways, right? So everything gets muddier when you're hybrid.
Makes sense.
So that's my very strong opinion against hybrid.
Okay, that's number 1. Okay.
That's number 1. I think second one is I guess I said that a bit, is just be aware about the costs and benefits of going remote, right? I mean, the benefits definitely is the talent part. It's just amazing how quickly you're able to get amazing talent from everywhere when you're going remote. But then also, and the benefits can be the scalability of it, but the costs are, for instance, the level of explicitness that you have to invest in a very early stage. So make sure you don't become remote or co-located by accident. Like, be explicit about the pros and cons, and then stick to your guns on how to do this. So first is like do remote or co-located, not hybrid. Second is be explicit about the decision that you're making.
Okay. And the third one?
And the third one is probably be very conscious about your communication, what you do synchronous and asynchronous. It's a little bit about the explicitness, but it's something that I've seen go wrong so many times. Either people default to fully asynchronous and they never talk to each other, they never meet up, and that's super sad, right? Or meet up, like they never have synchronous conversations. And you lose a lot of that speed in the early days if you only do that. If you only do synchronous, then you end up sitting in endless meetings, and we've all been there, I think, just sitting in endless meetings day in and day out, and you're also extremely inefficient. So the whole distribution of which things you want to do synchronous and which things you want to do asynchronous is a very powerful decision to make early on.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I guess we're good. Thanks a lot, Jakob, for sharing your insights on this international hiring staff, remote first culture at Butter, these challenges and obstacles of hiring globally. So yeah, thank you a lot. We wish you and Butter all the best in your journey. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See you.
Bye.